The Reel Deals are on the air now. And now, live from the Swords of St. Michael Studios, it's The Reel Deals. Kenneth and Farah's Deal. Okay, it is The Reel Deals tonight, -1, as Farah is on assignment. Okay, hello to everybody in the chat room on The Reel Deals chat room YouTube. Tonight we're going to talk about something different than we originally planned because A, Farah's not here, B, we were going to launch the LNM radio network first night show, and we postponed it to get more advertising up, some technical glitches, and make sure, I don't know if you call them glitches or not, something just needs to be configured a little different for the better. But the show will just be like any other show if you're watching YouTube, unless you're joining the LNM radio network, the podcast, at the lnmnetwork.com. It's got a little more versatile shows, and there will be simulcasting to that. And it'll be this time next week while we run our live show here on YouTube. So look for that. And we're going to use as sort of a launching pad, we're going to talk about our cases in more depth. I got somewhere, where did that? I wrote ones that I'm probably going to use, and then Farah's got some of her own before we even met, and it'll be more than an hour show. We're not going to do more than an hour show. It'll just be the usual hour, like 10 minutes over or something like that, and then fill the rest of the second hour up. That's for the LNM network, up with maybe videos of past interviews or something like that with Father Gary Thomas or something like that. We'll probably get him on live at some point anyway, with a brand new show. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit, amen. Saint Michael the Archangel, defend us in battle, be our protection against the mouse and the snares of the devil. May God rebuke him, and we humbly pray. And do thou, Prince of the heavenly host, by the divine powers of God, cast into hell Satan and all the other evil spirits who roam to the world, seeking the ruin of souls. Amen. Most Sacred Heart of Jesus, have mercy on us. Most Sacred Heart of Jesus, have mercy on us. Okay. I did realize, too, let me get this up here where I can get it closer, that we had a couple of things that were not addressed that were on the list. I'm going to leave anybody hanging, not that they're hot topics or anything. And there's the two of them right there that are unchecked that we did not answer in the previous episodes of the special Ask a Demonologist Q&A. We're going to do a live version of this show, and we're going to put the chat room right in the middle, where the questions have come primarily from the chat room in a couple of weeks, before Christmas. Blessing the grandkids has to do with the family hierarchy of who's really spiritually in charge over the children, and the mom and dad are more in charge. Now, if the mother or father dies, it does allocate up. It's just the way it works. The funny thing about this stuff is, when you read about this, you talk about it, I don't really mention it unless I saw it in action. If to bless the grandkids, they won't have the potency. There's some there, and it's not going to be better. It's the ghost hunter comes over. No, anybody but your parish priest in your district. That's like your personal spiritual leader, and your church in your town, whichever one you go to. And then above him, of course, is the bishop. Below him is the deacon. I mean, deacons are allowed to bless people, but not transubstantiate, the communion and all that kind of stuff. But I don't want to stay on that one too long, but that's what it has to do with. Okay, I want to move to the next one so we don't stay on this all night. Solomon's Ring of Power. Should I go over that one? That's almost I don't know, I'm tired of talking about that. It's so ridiculous.
Go to Solomon's Ring of Power.
Solomon's Ring of Power. I think I started talking about it on a solo episode podcast that I did lately, but you can look for it. It's a few videos back, just one or two. And basically, Solomon's Ring of Power is supposed to have what's called Solomon's Seal. That's the supposed Star of David, which not was the Star of David until the Rothschild's house. There's no Star of David anywhere. All the archaeological ruins, they never found it. And that's a known fact. If you look around and if you read the biased ones that want to promote that, that's true. Yeah, you're going to see it. The guys who love the, Keys of Solomon and stuff. But it wasn't, it was called the hexagram still, the intersecting triangles. Hexagram, hex. Where do you think the word to hex comes from? Which is, people pretty much consider that as the same thing as to curse you. Not cursing you like but curse you like putting a spell on you kind of thing. So it already has a negative background. If it's associated with kings,
King Solomon, in some sense. I reminded people in that video that King Solomon was a fallen one, like you could say David's predecessor, who conjured up Samuel's ghost, the Witch of Endor story, King Saul. So on the Ring of Power and the Solomon's seal, as they call it, has a circle around it. You know how they put a circle around pentagrams and stuff, so it has some potency. And the demonology we talk about isn't occult demonology. It's how to beat them, how to get rid of them, how to, do something positive, into separating yourself, unlike Solomon, from, I don't know if Solomon's in hell or not, but he certainly made himself a candidate. Big part he made a mistake was with inviting 600 wives into his life to be his wives. And I was thinking like that one day, he's going to have to take care of 3 a day just to get every woman her time with him. We'll just say intimacy. And only each woman only get him 1 time a year. There's like 600 very unhappy women. And he got a mix. He looked at somebody. He didn't care. You look good. Doesn't matter. He didn't ask if you believe in God, probably. So guys, just stay away from this stupid Ring of Power stuff. There's no truth. And stay away from the Keys of Solomon, lesser and greater keys. Stay away from the Book of Enoch. It's been known for a long time to be created around the like medieval times or something. And the scientists trying to prove where it comes from and if it exists. And people say at the best that it's Gnostic. That means where you had those neo-pagan supposed Christians who believed that Jesus was some kind of deity, but they didn't recognize him as the Son of God. And they started infiltrating, the scriptures. And so when they got the bishops together during Constantine in Nicaea, Constantine's time, Constantine assembled it, that they were together so long that someone finally said, "Hey, we've been here for 6 months." That's like Congress. 6 months trying to, weed out the bad Bibles. But let me tell you what, some of them, like the Book of Enoch, left immediately. They were so simple. If you read through there and you really know, well, I'm a diocese certified catechist, but that just kind of solidifies what they did in the process. They took it very seriously. They're not going to just throw out a book. The only ones who threw out the books was Luther at his time, and he started throwing them out and called them Apocrypha. The original older text had many books, never had. It's not a lost Bible. It's not a lost Bible part. It's not a lost book. The Book of Enoch has just kind of been inserted in there, and it's like, just throw everything off, and it's so bizarre. Demons are not the offspring. When we say demons in spiritual warfare, we mean demons that are, basically in definition, which is a Latin word. You can go to Wikipedia and all that stuff, and it doesn't tell you what it is. It's the fallen angels. That's what we're talking about, what we're dealing here. We're not talking about some supposed ghost created from some unnatural, unholy union that came between supposedly the fallen angels. They called them watchers and all this other stuff. And they came upon women like they have physical bodies and like God gave them seed. Deb, you still...
Are you taking any questions?
Hey, yeah, get some questions. I can't even see the chat room at the moment. Yeah, pop them in.
That's why I wish Sister Farah was here. Spa Diva wants to know, what about receiving a blood transfusion with someone else's blood, and then they become sick, like all the time? Can that be fixed?
Well, if it's spiritual, they have to find out. The doctors did blood tests, and they can find out the physical, I guess. But yeah, spiritually, that this is something else the Exorcist will talk about too, and Forte. I talk about the American ones more. I know I can understand their English. I couldn't understand Gabriel Moore's a sneak of English in there. He's deceased too. It is that they when you some of the people when you're a kid, you did that thing they used to call it blood brothers, like you're doing something a Native American does. That's where you like cut your hand and then you do this kind of thing, that masculine. Yeah, we're not brothers.
All done that as kids.
You're not supposed to do that, even when you have, intimacy.
I know, but I did it as a kid too.
Yeah, but you are sharing blood a little bit, because all it needs is like just a little bit and have intention.
Yep.
If it has intention and knowledge that it's from another person, it's a little more.
Yeah.
But the reality is, do you remember those movies where it was like the hand, started coming to life and he's fighting it? He got it as a transplant. Turns out it came from some convict who got hanged. He finds out later. I think they had more than one on that. the crawling hand. You know.
Hearing
Oh my gosh!
like
Didn't that happen
yeah.
on that one movie, Evil Dead 2 or something? I don't know. You cut it off with a chainsaw and it's attacking him and stuff. Nothing like that. I just mean that it's like it was the idea that it's haunted and it has a mind of its own. It's not going to be exactly like that, but you just merge your blood with a murderer, and you're going to suffer it just as the same as when you have, don't go laying down with a sorcerer or whatever, the practicing the black arts, because you're going to get their demons on you too. So you have to essentially do breaking curses prayers. And I'd say I'd do them for 9 days. They're on our website, swordsofsaintmichael.org. And you can do those. Do prayer 1 and prayer 2. It's on the prayers list. You can do those and renounce that if you did a blood brother pack. If you got a blood transfusion, you're going to renounce the blood transfusion. No, you're just going to do it. And then, as long as you next time you go to confession, that'll pretty much wrap it up, because you'll get blessed again, and along with your confession penance. Hope that answers it. Good enough.
Yeah.
All right.
I think we have another question.
Yeah, go ahead.
From Zilma. She wants to know, what about bringing someone else's mirror to your house, like buying an antique or something like that, or if you got one from a tag sale?
Yeah, you can bless it and just be on the safe side. And if nothing happens, experiences, and don't psych yourself out, because you're going to make yourself have dreams and stuff and get scared of it. Because antique ones are kind of creepy, because all the movies had really cool antique ones. Even that Lost in Space episode where there's really long one, and it's like a portal to the other dimension. And I think Penny Robinson gets trapped in that, and it's got these heads on it, and they snort, you smoke out of them, when the portal opens up. But yeah, we kind of been programmed that these things are unnatural. No thanks to Constantine. I don't mean the Emperor. I mean the movie. Don't worry about Constantine later on if I get bored. But you can even have a regular full-length mirror, and that one might even be something. But it's not as much. It's kind of rare. But we're told that when we bring something from a garage sale, you like garage sales too, you find the cool and cheap stuff there. I mean, cheap as in hardly any money. And you should always bless that stuff, because you don't know what might have been in there. Yeah.
I do.
Something so innocent that doesn't really have occult use or whatever, just in proximity of that. Let's say they had a black mass in this place they used to be in, a chair or something. And then
I could even go to a thrift store if I pick up something that like I like old furniture. And because I like redoing furniture.
Yeah.
And
oh, cool.
I carry the holy water in the car with me, because I'll bless it as soon as I put it into the car, even before I put it in the car.
Yeah, that's smart. See, even I don't remember to do that, because we kind of forget when it's
innocent.
innocent.
And I've learned that from my mother.
Oh, yeah, well, that was good. Good mothers.
Yeah.
But on the other thing is that it can go in degrees too, not proximity, but if somebody actually practices speculum in a full-length bathroom mirror, the way try to predict the future or to see your spirit guide or any of those kind of things. What's the other one called again? It's
Is it scrying?
Oculum? Or I don't know what it is. There's another word for it too. Scrying. Speculum, scrying, whatever, that kind of thing. But yeah, just bless it.
Yeah.
Sometimes if you haven't had your priest over a while to bless your house, have them bless that and say, hey, could you bless this mirror while you're at it too? And it's like, okay, I mean, have them over for dinner, make it worth its while. Not that you need to do that though, but we should have priests over at least once a year in this day and age. The things that we bring in, the people, the things that we experience, you never know, especially if you have teenagers in the house.
Okay. We have another question, Ken.
Okay.
How long can holy water repel demons when you bless your own house? How long does it take, average, for demons to come back? That would probably depend on the demon, on the person.
Oh, I know. Yeah, exactly right. Because if you have something small like a sound's waking you up in the middle of the night, and it's the same time every night, you could probably properly bless your house just once, and you won't see it for another week. But that's assuming you don't have an object in there, or something else that's still working, or like you said, the potency of the demon. The ones that we said that often are dealt with that do small things, and they run off easy when you say Jesus' name, like the sleep paralysis ones. those seem to be easier to get rid of. Because most they wouldn't leave so easy. They want to hold you as long as possible to freak you out and make them think it's going to take something really big, like the Pope, to bless it and get it off you. But when they run away like a scared child, running away from a mean dog, and you just said, in the name of Jesus Christ, what? And they're gone. I mean, that's obviously not. How much of a strategy are they going to get away with on that, pretending to be more scared than they are? They're too proud anyway. So I don't know. I would just say, pay attention the next 3 days, and then do it and repeat it as necessary, depending on how bad. You remember what we're talking about tonight? This is perfect for it too. Is the extraordinary and ordinary diabolical activity. If you have extraordinary diabolical activity, you're probably going to do a lot more as the owner, and you need to get a priest involved so that you're protected, so that you have that extra edge. I know there's a lot of times we have a Burger King drive-through of a ministry that we've had over 1,000 cases that had just been by the phone, and not saying take 2 aspirins and call in the morning, but we have a formula specific to each problem they have, and then they call us back and say, hey, it'll work, write us back, or they don't call us back at all, and that's a good sign. Because I told them to call us back if you need something more, and I'm sure they would take the invitation if I can send them St. Benedict medals, but that's a good thing. That's what that means.
Definitely.
Yeah, can you imagine if they had over-the-counter drugs for just about everything? Like that. Instead, it's like less and less are out there so that you can buy the next drug that's going to basically almost take your life with a bunch of other symptoms that are...
Down, and I'll throw it out there to Ken.
Yeah, Deb's overloaded tonight, too. She's like got full chat room duty and full co-host duty. And then a phone that didn't work for a minute there for whatever reason. Blame it on Skype. This is a different manuscript as far as the compiling of it is. I got it off an ebook, but a spiritual theology by Jordan Amen. For you, Father Chad Rippinger fans out there, he's referred to a lot. Father Amen basically is doing what Father Chad did. He put St. Thomas Aquinas, into more of a kind of a layman's terms perspective. In a lot of ways, that's what we do. That I've always been bad with terminology, even in psychology. So I don't, I'm like, okay, finally I remember what's the name of that thing on the altar that holds the hosts? The monstrous, those things don't stick with me very well, just like names don't. I can remember the faces. I know you, like that. But that's just me. I got my limits and I got my pluses and stuff, and that's one of them. But this book has in a section, it's not a bad for the details, but it's definitely ahead of its time. Okay, we'll go down here. With God's permission, the devil can do any of the following, and I don't know at this point if it's actually considered extraordinary activity, but I'm going to say probably, as we read, we'll know if we don't figure it out in itself. A purpose, let's see, produce corporeal or imaginative visions, not intellectual visions. Oh, he can do any of the following. Imaginative visions, not intellectual visions. Okay, well, when they tempt you with memory straight out of your head, like it's a video playing in your head of when you were there, like some sort of virtual reality encounter of the past. And that's how they tempt you. People can be tempted for a number of reasons, even a strong memory, like Vietnam flashbacks or something from PTSD. Maybe they have, they're in your head that way. We've had certain indications that such a thing is true.
Ken, we have sort of a little question here.
Okay.
Somebody works with a lady, and she is Wicca or witch, and she said she will pray for me at this time. I didn't know she was Wicca. The next day I was so sick. Could her praying to Mother Goddess, Venus, cause this? Yeah,
unfortunately. They're not compatible, and it's the same as putting a curse on somebody. Because there's always something that that have to get back. If you make a deal with a spirit that is not of heaven, that they take something in return for it. There's always something to pay. There's always a price to pay, and that's why pharmaceuticals are so strange. That every pharmaceutical has that same kind of attribute element. That when you get this cure, supposedly, and it helps you live longer without the symptoms of this, but some of the symptoms is you may die of sudden death. So you got to be ready for the consequences. And if you're Christian,
fully in, you're gonna get kind of a payback. But what can you do? Tell them how do you tell somebody to politely? That's when my wife, but she's a protocol droid, politely. Oh no, please don't pray for me. It's not. I don't even know how to say that. But it happens in the past. They do it when they don't tell you. But she didn't know, and she can't. It's not her. It's not anything that she did as the person to receive it, but she should treat it like it's a curse initially. It's also possible that she just might have gotten sick by default, more sick, and it had nothing to do with it. Because I hadn't really noticed when people said they'll pray for me, it actually got worse or anything like that. So if all people, I mean, I had curses put on me, and I seen it in the forums, and people pointed it out, and they said exactly what it was. And, oh, really? When did that happen? Oh, last December? And it's like, I don't remember anything. You know what I mean? It's... that realistically it's not supposed to do anything unless it's God's permissible will. In other words, you're going to learn something and you're going to get something positive from it that you need for your goal, the ultimate goal of heaven. But that's something we do just as precautions. Like when we buy something, we can say, I'm a Christian. This antique deck of tarot cards that I have in my display case shouldn't do anything. I mean, you got to take it with a grain of salt. Kind of like the blood transfusion thing, too. Kind of goes to that you can be... have that transfusion, and you may not have anything to do, but we just do things in precaution so they don't pile up and end up as something, where you give it cents here and there, and next thing you know, it's over $1. Yeah, because I don't want to default back and go, what happened? Just a lot of little things, hundreds. And we're going to go find them and do scavenger hunt to clear our house because we got a little loose because we like the kind of the cool-looking Dungeons & Dragons-looking daggers and stuff that Wicca sometimes has, and those type of things, can be tempting. And some beautiful Ouija boards out there. You see the old ones with it looks like a real beautiful picture frame around the edge and all that stuff. And it looks like they routed out the letters and then filled it in with some kind of glaze, and then waxed it. And I mean, that's the kind of thing. It's a lot of beautiful witches out there. It doesn't mean you marry them or let them seduce you either.
Ken, yesterday Alan sent me a picture that he found on the internet, and it was of a beautiful hardwood floor in somebody's living room, and they had a full Ouija board put on it.
Wow! Talk about a party with that.
Floor Ouija board was professionally done.
Ed Warren said once, you're kind of like your second father, Ed was, to you, because he was such a godsend and your whole family was in turmoil. There was nobody else available at the time, so we can only say so much about the Warrens. They helped Deb, our good friend, out back in the 80s in a way no one else could on one of the worst cases I've ever heard in history. But he said that it's just a piece of wood with, what is it, masonite and a pressed sticker. And I said, no. I mean, I didn't say it then. I wasn't around to contradict him in the 80s. But I did in the 90s, and I did, and since then. But, in all due respect, even the book, that I wrote the first book, I put that in there. But I did it in all due respect, because he did get a lot of people started, and there was nothing else out there. Gerald told me one day, he said that I got this big fat check. It was around the time we did our show, and it was a royalty check because the university had a conference, and they had priests there, and they were using the Demonologist to reference cases and demonology and applied, conditions, case studies. And I thought, wow, it was like a 200 or something like that. I don't know how many it was, but it was a bigger convention like that one they have every once in a while where they have some of the priests and exorcists. We'll probably be at one of those one day. We just we haven't looked for them, and we'll probably be doing it on behalf of the diocese and the state first. The first thing we'll get to. But that's not, that's
Ken,
not
you
true.
have a question here. If you want to take this, it says, Brother Kenneth, what do you think of Medjugorje?
Oh, Medjugorje, I don't know. I shouldn't. Funny how many
If you
problems
don't
talking
want
about
to discuss
Garabandal.
that on this show tonight, you could always do it another night.
We have a town here near Springfield, and it's called Cuba, Missouri. There's a church up there, a Catholic church. And the boy in that group, he came there to speak about the apparitions, the visions, and to
basically, pray and like as Mary would appear to him, and I don't know if people pay attention to the second part. I really expected it. I didn't go. I didn't hear how heavy it was for a crowd and all that stuff. But what happened was it was, let's see, did that one have the basketball game? Because I know somebody else that had something like that. Was he went through the whole thing, and then when he's done, he just went over and kneeled down, and then the Blessed Mother appeared to him. Of course, nobody saw it, but he put on the routine as though he really seen it, like the other gal does. It's blonde, who's still in the country over there, Yugoslavia, whatever it is. And I think that's rather odd that, suddenly you have this thing like that Star Trek angel, friendly angel, come to me. Remember those kids working in a circle and just demonic, pretending to be an angel, even though they didn't use those words in the movie, or in the Star Trek, old Star Trek with Captain Kirk, was played by William Shatner. I think some of the people who know that show know that episode, and I always thought that's true because, even back then my mom and dad knew about these topics when I was a kid, so we had a weird family growing up. We knew about all these apparitions. But then another place, one of them showed up, and I think the boy is traveling more, into the States and stuff, and the other one's backed off. He went to this one place, and it's scheduled, and so what he did was they had a basketball game, and then they went into overtime, and first they had to delay the date of the appearance for him, and the Blessed Mother apparently too, and then when the basketball game was going into overtime or something like that, as I remember, and so then it was delayed like an hour and a half, 2 hours. Luckily it was an afternoon game. So then he goes in there and he does the same thing again. He just talks about it, and then he gets down on the knees, and then suddenly, it's like, there she is. She just, did like Darth Vader kneeling down, and then suddenly the Emperor appears up on this. People are going to get mad at me for this, but I'm just asking the questions. Don't you think that on-demand Blessed Mother visitations is rather odd on any level, or anybody, or any saint, or anything? That is just conjuring. Isn't so one way or another? I've never heard it in history. It's not in the catechism. It's not in any of the approved apparitions. It's still not approved. So I think the bottom line maybe is to be very careful on ones that aren't approved. We were talking about Bayside, Deb. We'll talk about that on some other time. I'm still looking into some things. But I find out that the traditional Catholics swing to, sometimes the SSPX and the people who are going to the traditional Latin Mass, great bunch of people, and even the SSPX, the Seti Vacantis, they believe in Garabandal, and I know definitively it's demonic. I've looked over it a long time. My mother and father followed it since the beginning and dumped it, and I remember when I was seeing the video when I was a kid, and I said, that looks demonic. They're walking backwards. Now we have this kid that he ran up the wall that the Jack Baggins, might as well say Jack. Zach Baggins, he bought that house, and that was the house where the kid became possessed, and he walked backwards up the wall right in front of the, social services worker. And back then when I saw it, I said, this is bizarre. They're walking down this rocky hill backwards with their neck cocked at 45-degree angle, 90-degree angle. And there's a lot of stuff, and we did a show on that, Deb, as you remember. And that's on our Reel Deels page here. Type in Garabandal in the search. And the one is more like the post-1960s is Medjugorje people, and then the ones other than that is the Garabandal that don't really follow the I don't know what they call the modernism of Vatican II. And you'll get them divided on that thing there too, for some reason. They still cling to that. And if they had discernment, they would know Garabandal. And I go, what about Padre Pio? Well, we have one of our traditional priests who said Padre Pio got it wrong. But all he did was tell Joey Limagino, I think his name was, something like that, the guy who was blind, is they told him, Padre Pio said, why not? He said, you think I should go to Garabandal? And Padre Pio said, why not? Padre Pio cured his nose smell, but it didn't cure his eyes. He did prayer, and he tapped on his forehead, and he got his smelling back. And then he's on the way to Garabandal. He never got his smelling back, even though he was told, what do you call it, smelling? Oh, yeah, now he smells again. Sorry. I don't come up with the right words and it flies so fast. I talk like Ben Shapiro, and then I start to sound hillbilly-ish or whatever. But I don't know. I don't have my that hemisphere of the brain as well developed to communicate what's on the other side of the brain as I'd like to have. But the point is that the signs are all there, if you'd really look. And I think that's why people need discernment. That's why they get mixed up with phony priests and stuff, is they really don't have discernment. Even if you're a psychic medium or whatever you call yourself, a sensitive, and you would know right away that, yeah, hey, this is wrong, or that person's wrong, or, that kind of thing. We have to pray for that, because we live in this world of deception, and it's so bad now that even fake, Blessed Mother. No, Garabandal was a spirit, but it was not a good one, because the proof that it was like supernatural, it was there, even if it was weaker in some areas compared to Fatima, for example. Medjugorje doesn't seem to have anything but post miracles. In other words, if you get a bunch of people who pray and gather at the same place, do a lot of rosaries, that can become a holy site. Not because allegedly a Blessed Mother appeared there, but because all these people have gathered in large numbers in prayer to give reverence and honoring to the Mother of Jesus, and then celebrate Mass there, and all of that stuff that's positive is going on there. That site is going to be more significant, just as a site where there's a tree in a graveyard and Satanists and witches or whatever have been practicing around that tree their dark arts, that you don't even want to go near it, because you're going to have something the opposite of healing and miracles. It'll be called a curse just by crossing it. Plenty of stories. Even John Zaffis's friend Stacy had, I don't think it was Stacy, but I guess that's irrelevant. Her son, they went in a graveyard taking pictures. It was in the day, and he walked across some graveyards, grave in particular, and saw something as he did it. And after that, he ended up getting possessed. Not quick, but it happened gradually, but soon enough for her to point it to the graveyard. Something must have happened. So be careful when we go doing these kind of strange haunt tours or something, either it's because you love an old building like we do. Scooby-Doo building, Scooby-Doo hunting, or something like that. Okay. So, as we were reading on, falsify ecstasy. We get this with somebody, the ancient and the recurrent. Falsifying ecstasy, that's where just because you feel intense joy doesn't mean it comes from God. Produce rays of light in the body and sensible heat. This is also called diabolical incandescence. This is another way they fool people into thinking that is a positive spirit, it's a positive effect, a feeling. They do that all the time. You really think that if they come in ugly, smelling, dark, and all that stuff, that you're going to want to be friends with them or anything like that, or even give them a time of day?
Yeah.
Let's see. Demons cause sensible consolations and tenderness. This is, again, how they... so that's why you got to really be careful, and you really got to pray and test the spirit. Someone said that, well, you say Jesus' name and then they'll flinch, but what you do is you don't get them. We had this one gal crying out for Jesus. It's like, oh, Jesus, please tell them to leave, or something like that. I don't know, another thing, Jesus, help me, or whatever. And then I remember some of these things that, the Bible says, and you can really go literally to the Bible on this. And then, when you test the spirit, try to get the person to declare that Jesus is the Son of God. It pains them more than just say Jesus. Say that Jesus Christ is the true Son of God. And if they can't say it, I mean, some of them will. The really high up ones can suck it up. They'll be like, Jesus Christ, they can just like suck up the pain. We know that because most they wouldn't get through the first part of an exorcism if that wasn't true. But you got to test the spirit with that. And if you're, the more you collaborate with these things, the more they're going to not have any problem with it, because you can walk into a church and get communion and everything and be a Satanist. Because of your collaboration with them, you're going to be, I'm not going to say bulletproof, but you make the spirit bulletproof by being the housing for them. So you don't have the reaction. The more unwilling you are to their presence, the more you're going to react to the sacred. At some point or another, it gets like what Malachi Martin said about perfect possession, but there's really no perfect possession. If you look theologically and all that, that's a little cute little term he made up. That, like we do. We have our Farah-isms, I don't know, my-isms or whatever, and and Deb-isms, I don't know, to some degree.
So he would call it perfect possession?
Yeah, he'd call it perfect possession, like someone like a politician or somebody, like Damien.
Yeah.
Like Damien.
And that, back in the time, in the early 80s, we had called it full-blown possession.
Full possession, right. Because partial possession not only could mean like some of you is possessed and you're not unconscious totally, but you're listening to your mouth talk like Tourette. and just say all, I don't know, weird stuff. It could be obscene. It could be no cussing or anything in there, but you've lost control of your mouth. Some people woke up from sleeping like that, and it took 5 minutes for that to wear off, and they listened to their mouth speak a foreign language, and then it turns out they were praising Satan. And that's not full possession, obviously. Most they wouldn't be able to get up and splash their face with cold water. But full possession would be like...
Just like if you think about it, Ken, some people go into a coma. If they were in an accident or something, they went into a coma.
Yeah.
And then when they come out of a coma, they're speaking a total different language, and they can't communicate with their family.
Yeah, and a linguist should be able to identify any language. And for me to explain that, I had to be a linguist. But it makes sense to me, just like mathematics does. I don't have to understand and know every aspect of mathematics on through calculus. We had to learn that in electronics. But there's certain elements, and if something's not a language, they're going to find that it doesn't have any elements of communication in there. So some of these things, when people become possessed and they just babble, they're just babbling. Sometimes they're making fun of you when you're praying, when they're babbling. Like, yeah. It's kind of like saying that, if they're saying that and disrespecting.
When they're babbling or a language, that's not spoken.
Yeah.
But a lot of times I've heard cases that people, when they've come out of a coma, they speak a total different language. I don't care if it's German, Italian, Spanish, and then they can't communicate with their families.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, in my first book, I got criticized by a fake brother. There's no self-profession to become a brother. We spent 4 years in formation, and you're not going to want to do if you're just wanting to get some name or reputation because there is no school of demonology, that really give you a real certificate, and it won't be a priest who does it, or even a brother for that matter. Unless we started up again. That they look for that in validation, but these things filter the people out. When you have to go through formation of such level, and you've got to go through there, and you get basically tested, you're subjected to the opinions of your peers. So they wonder if you're ready, or if you should wait longer, or if you should even continue your Franciscan walk. But I think it would weed it out. I think if there was some sort of standard out there, we talked about this a long time ago, on some of these websites and so forth, as a group, a collective, someone to come up with a standard, because everybody's using these terms and they got all sorts of mixed bag of tricks and very little experience or something. But the coming out of the coma thing, I mentioned that in the first book, and I was talking about it as that something happened when they died and they came back, and we tried to narrow down that a little bit. And when they woke up out and came out of a coma, or they came out of a anesthesia, they acted possessed, and they had abnormal human strength. They act like an animal, and you got to wonder why. And the person doesn't remember it, and they never seen anybody. They didn't see them act like that when they're mad, they're mild, and that sort of thing. So you got to wonder, is there some spiritual element in that? So we've seen, heard, and read about enough cases that we said, go and renew your baptismal vows. Have the priest do another blessing of the sick. Something to sort of renew you and clear you. And then this fake brother attacks me, and he bought my book, and he bought the underground edition, which is printed off the printer before it got published back in whatever it was, 2007. And he criticized me. He says against the catechism and get baptized a second time. I used that word rebaptized because I couldn't think of it, and then later on I said baptism renewal, and he didn't even mention that. It's just like he's taking me out of context. Good grief, man. And then he's putting it up all over, and guess what? He even wrote it on my Amazon review. He wrote it right in there and gave me 1 star. Nobody gave me 1 star, even though it has spelling errors and stuff in there because I didn't get it edited. The original book, as she was going by. He didn't criticize that at all, and that's the only thing he can find in the whole book that he had a problem with. Well, I proved them wrong, and he deleted all his sub-comments, the comments that were attached to the original review. And I tried to call Amazon, and I talked to them 3 times, and they act like they couldn't remove it. And I said, why? I said, look at the page. I said, pull my book out of your shelf or wherever you got it in the warehouse. And I'll tell you, see this where he says page? Do you notice that page is non-existent? Because he's reading from a different book. I even proved that it was a different book he was reading from, and they still didn't take it down. It's like they're not eBay. Where eBay will say, well, that's your opinion, you leave it up, and you find out some people think that you're selling a counterfeit or that your item was so horribly packed and everything, and it wasn't you, it was their customs department that tore it open and stuff like that over in their country. And they start criticizing you. Sometimes you can get eBay to remove that, but sometimes eBay says, "Well, that's just your opinion. It won't, it shouldn't affect your story anyway. So you got to get a high rating or something like that." But I don't know. Just don't get me started on that. I don't want to turn the show into a rant on another topic.
All right, we have another question, Ken. We won't get you started.
Yeah.
Okay. Do all demons bind to the foot of the cross in Jesus' name equally?
No, because we don't. It depends on who does the authority of it. We don't. Some of them we don't have the authority. Even in the Bible, when Jesus said this one will take much prayer and fasting, that when the person in his free will or generational line may have committed him, satanically or something, like they can do, parents can do that when they're babies in the womb still, that it might cause so much of them embedding that just to do it equally with the same person would be the same that, hey, I can say the Roman ritual and they're gone every time. We're talking to one of our exorcists on the other end of the country about a case that he was working on, and he says it does seem like the person is too much into the idea that the spirit is kind of a symbiont. It's more part of them, and then you struggle big time. So when you take the psychological and the spiritual health of the person and individual, and then whatever possible soul wounds they have, from whatever past experiences, and then their free will choice, and then when you get beyond those kind of things, you go to who's doing the ritual. The priest. Is it just a regular priest? If he's appointed by the bishop, that's one of the things in the Catholic Catechism. Here again with the terminology, there's a name of terminology. I should carry around a little booklet that just has the terminology in or something. But I'm learning a bunch of different stuff, and I'm trying to beef up on C++, and I just don't, all the rules and stuff in there. It's like, I'm not going to do one thing at a time. I don't know. That the bishop allocates his powers. One of his powers, so to speak, is his things that's given to him automatically when he's consecrated a bishop. He allocates that to the appointed priest. So the priest is actually acting as a bishop in that sense of being an exorcist, like our exorcist here. And so he gets the power of the bishop in that sense of driving out demons. Now his thing will be more potent. No one's will be as potent as Jesus was. The priests are like the apostles in that. And if they're pious and everything, they should just be like the apostles, just exactly like that. A lot of the examples in the Bible were for learning purposes. So Jesus, in his grand plan from heaven, all of those things, and they were trying to show us lessons. So it's not really the average. When the apostles, you say, hey, there was 7 demoniacs expelled by either apostles or demons in the whole book. I don't know how many there were, but I can't recall. But the fact is, you can't use that as an average. They use every one of those as examples. So you might say the average time that it's going to take several sessions, depending on how bad and nasty it is. But in other cases, somebody like us, might get it done. But I'm not really sure if I'm actually binding them at the foot of the cross of Jesus. Is that we're not ordained, but we're professed, and we are appointed through the bishop's office, so that gives us something extra than, say, lady. So we have 2 levels that a regular, lady would have, and I still can't, I don't think that we would have the authority to bind him at the cross, but I'm going to say it anyway as an intention, and I would never know until the day I die on that one, I think, because they only address it with the priest.
Can we take another question?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Tony writes, I have another question. I'm 23 years old. How do I help others with deliverance and work with my diocese? I have a lot to learn. Where would I start?
The best things you can do is get the right books, but possession should be something you touch later, because that one's the one that messes your life up really bad. There's a team that went through, I think, their first possession, because sometimes people act possessed and they're not, like that on that show Paranormal State, and there's this gal, that episode was called I Am 6. I watched the first one, I think, oh, this is laughable. The most she is, she's just like just has a sex issue or something or whatever, but a lot of churches call it possession, and it's not. It's laughable, it's drama or something like that, and even a mailman could probably expel it. And you can test them and they won't react the way they should. One of our friends, who seems to be retired, did this one thing where he pretended to speak, you know, in another language, a prayer of deliverance, and the person went, stuff like that. And he said, you know, he's like, yeah, because he knows he's not speaking some real language. So that person shouldn't have been doing that. We used fake relic and gave the impression, just want to see what happened. Now, the demon could be doing it anyway because it's trying to confuse us. But the point is possessions, isn't that one case I was telling you, was that they went to this case, the colleague, you know, assistant, and we'll just say deliverance priest, he wasn't appointed by his bishop to go further, and the person was sitting in a chair when they got there, one of those easy chairs, and they peed in the chair right when they got there, and they did some prayers, and some symptoms started showing up of true possession, with the face contorting and that kind of thing, and the changing. And the eyes don't roll back in their heads as much as you think, like, right, and they'll look at you like that and they're awake. They go into some catatonic state, and that's what had happened. You lift your eyelids, and that rolled back eye thing, I don't know. I don't know if you saw that or not, Deb. I should ask you what his face looked like, but I don't like to bring up the scarred past either too much and exploit your wonderful presence here. But anyway. Yeah.
Well, I hear you're going to have a fantastic show next week.
Oh, yeah. We'll get to that, and remind me right before we close out with our little magical music.
It'll be a show no one's ever heard, ever.
Well, it's just in small samples, and I do mean small. The whole show will just be about cases that we experienced before and after being together as husband and wife. Some cases that go further back. We're not mentioning anything that we dealt with personally, which is a book in itself, but it was a training ground, school of hard knocks, to have to find out the hard way. Crucifixes, not crosses. Anyway, the case rubbed off in them too bad way. Had bad luck in a large series. It's usually really noticeable inside of a week. You know, getting in a car wreck. 3 family members got in a car wreck in the same month. And they didn't expect this, because you got to tell them, hey, you got retaliation going on. You got payback. This is what you got to avoid. You got to get you boned up in your prayer life. You got to get a spiritual director and talk to them, and they can kind of guide you along as to when you're ready. Most of the time, I'd say over 30, you know, would be the safe time to actually be involved. But the priest and whoever you end up working with, if they see you're particularly pious, they might have you, you know, travel and assist to some degree. And if it rubs you the wrong way, then you should quit immediately. And in the meantime, you can read, but you're going to have to pray for protection. As soon as they know you're taking up arms for future, I put a warning in the beginning of my first book on something like that. That basically tells the people that your life is about to change. Hold on. Something else, can't necessarily drink in a commercial. Your life's about to change, so they're going to go after you because they know you're preparing for the battle. You're not preparing unhealthily a curiosity that could lead to some sort of hybrid of occultism, Catholic, or, you know, anything neo-pagan, you know, where they're going in the right direction in their opinion. But when you go to the direction where you're going to be a threat to them, they're going to let you know about it. And they're going to try to scare you off of it through nightmares, shadow visits to the bed. And you got to be prepared for that and get the prayers. And you can do the daily prayers of protection. Start them right away once you start your studies. Now, I know people can't just pick the specialist. God's got to pick you. He's got to pick your specialty, or it's not going to work usually. And I can say especially sometimes you don't even know that you should deal with sitting in on possessions until on ritual, the actual ritual, until you've actually got everything else in place. And you might be an investigator. You might be helping to psychologically evaluate if you have a background on that. You might be a prayer warrior where you don't even show up in a site, instead of praying on the site with the exorcism going on in the room at the same time or anything like that. And part of it, the payback, is the thing you'll know back right away. And you got to watch out for the long-term payback, because that can go on. And you remember, Deb? Remember you had a Ouija board experiences, and then your brother's possessed 10 years later?
Yeah, I know.
That was patience. But they knew they had it. I'm going to play that card when I'm ready. I'll take them all down at once. That's easy. Exactly.
They've got all the time they need.
Yeah. So,
they're not going to strike you the next day or 2 weeks later.
Yeah.
They're going to wait until you forget all about it, or when you're at your low peak.
And that's the sad part. It hits you when you're down. Yeah.
Yeah.
Kick them when you're down.
That's the best time to do it.
The books and all those things is stay with the books. I mean, our books and all that stuff, we actually mixed some of the experiences like with that you would read on cases that were done more by teams that more investigated as to the why, answering all the questions: who, what, where, when, and how and why. And person, place, or thing. We add those two things in there. In the investigation, it's very simplified. You can read our books, CatholicDemonologist.org, and just go to swordtostmichael.org. I hope I have all the PayPal links updated. It's also on Amazon, but we sign the other ones. I'm getting ready to put the ebooks up on the ones that aren't the handbooks. We have 6 books out, and the last one's still hand published right off the printer. We haven't had time to go over it one last time and then send it to the editor. I was even thinking of releasing it temporarily on PDF. Amazon Kindle, and then getting it published and then removing it off Amazon Kindle for $9.99, something in that neighborhood. Gabriel Amar's books, An Exorcist Tells a Story, even the last one, and the one that's called An Interview with an Exorcist, I think the guy who interviewed him was Nicky so-and-so, Italian guy. Those are really good, but they'll talk more about possessions than the first 2, which are very enlightening, and it's the best ones out there. And then he gets into, finally, and I'm glad he did, the activity of houses and objects that affect this world and demonics, where there is no possession present, although those things can happen around a possession. And some we'll just skip over to Father Chad. If you're wanted to do the psychological stuff, he's a PhD psychologist, a theology theologian, and I think a philosophy PhD. I'm not sure. I might be thinking of Father Dennis in town here, who also has 3 in those. He doesn't believe. He's passed away. He wasn't a spiritual warfare guy per se. What a waste. And he was a Benedictine too. He always blessed our Saint Benedict. So never asked any questions. Well, I think we got to get with the show. You can ask more questions related to this. So you can get in touch with us and help you make your discernment path. I ask God, what should our parameters? How far should we go before we have to get a priest? We have to pray for each one. We did minor rites, consisting of different set of prayers, probably what you might expect, instead of just flat out doing the Leo XIII. Full possession. People were kicking 300-pound men off. And that was a horrific one. We're going to talk about that one next week, among other ones, and it's going to be a good show, definitely. The time is so much past. It's actually 15 minutes after now, Deb. So
we're at the top of the hour.
I hope everybody will take note of this and spread it around, because we wanted to lure more people from other countries who can only attend, say on the weekend, because they're not coming out of work. But then again, I got to go to bed early because I got to get to work the next day. We might lose another half of it on the later side, huh, Deb? All right. Well, God bless everybody.
I want to say good night, and God bless.
Yeah, I'm going to have to pop in the chat room after I sign off here. But everybody, we'll be back just as normal next week, except we'll be simulcasting on that new, it's a podcast, internet. We did the FM thing before, but that's kind of fussy. Some people just don't, cling to it. This is for the people who seek your higher study and knowledge and information, whatever. Oh, yeah, check out the Father Chad Rippiger videos to the guy who asked the last question. It's an awful lot to digest. He talks fast. He gives a lot of things, but so do we. This is the generation of the educators now. All right. Good night, Deb. Glad that you were able to make it. I'd be all by my solo here. Check out for some other videos that we're calling The Art of the Deals. It's of course, those are initial ones are going to be on spiritual warfare. But since I got a lot of things I can do, I might do some things on other topics. But check them out. Probably one I'm going to probably put up tomorrow or Tuesday at the latest. All right, here we go. God bless. Good night. Don't eat too much gravy leftovers. Or Thanksgiving turkey or mashed potatoes. The Reel Deels TV show, copyright 2018. A Swords of St. Michael production. Any unauthorized duplication or rebroadcast or retransmission of this broadcast without the express written permission of the Swords of the Saint Network or that of Kenneth and Farah Deel is strictly prohibited.